All right, it's time for more world history fun times in the closet. I'm more tired than when I talked about the rise of dictators. It's way too late, but that's what I get for having small children and still wanting to talk to you about literally everything is Hitler. Just like I did in the rise of dictator notes, I want to give you the instructions with the corresponding page in the interactive notebook. So if you look at page 4, it is perspectives on appeasement. So this one is relatively simple. Should take you a couple 5 minutes to knock out when you're done listening to me be very excited at almost midnight on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Um, so you see two individuals pictured here, Adolf Hitler, the leader of Germany, and Neville Chamberlain, the leader of the United Kingdom. So here, if you need additional information about appeasement, you can click on the blue hyperlinks at the top. But in each of these thought bubbles, you are going to translate for me what you think this individual is thinking in terms of appeasement. And then in the boxes at the bottom, you're going to describe how Neville Chamberlain sees Adolf Hitler and how Adolf Hitler sees or perceives Neville Chamberlain. Clear as mud? Cool. So, in terms of talking about appeasement, I have another little warm up that we'll discuss during office hours. So, we have a political cartoon, and I'm going to see if I can move me talking down to the bottom. Success. It says, what have you done today to save your country from them? So what I want you to do first is source the material, look at who the artist of the cartoon is, and if you've not looked at any of these, you might be surprised. Number 2, who are the two individuals pictured in the drawing? And number 3, what is the cartoon attempting to get people to do? So pause the video for a second, think of or come up with your answers to these 3 questions, and be prepared to discuss them during our office hours. So in terms of talking about appeasement, we're going to look at the failed attempts to kind of calm Germany down and kind of the official beginning of World War II, right? And it's a little bit harder in terms of, World War I, we could talk about, was the assassination of the Archduke the official beginning of World War I? Was it the domino of alliance-based wars, or was it something inevitable, right? But for the most part, we looked at the assassination and went, yep, we'll stick with that date. That's the go time. It gets a little bit muddier in terms of talking about the beginning of World War One. If you are missing the very terrible music videos I would play for you in class, you have a link in your copy of these notes on Classroom to watch Mr. Betts sing a song about appeasement to an Ariana Grande song that I have no idea what it is because I'm old and, I listen to a lot of music with people screaming in it that ceased to be made after like 2007. So to bring you back to the DBQ that we wrote before spring break, I want to talk about the end of World War One and the Treaty of Versailles. Right? You answered the question as to whether or not Germany was fairly targeted with having to repay debts, et cetera, after the end of World War One. Right? Was World War One Germany's fault? The Treaty of Versailles most definitely uh, argues that it was Germany's fault. And there are several conditions, but in terms of looking at what are the factors that lead to the beginning of World War II, there are kind of 5 that we can distill down to. Number 1, Germany had to accept the blame for the war, right? And you took both sides in that argument on your DBQ, and both of you, you all made persuasive arguments as to whether or not they were or were not fairly targeted with all the blame. But it's definitely something that hurts national pride, right? And Germany was essentially bullied into taking these terms and conditions to end the war. So that's kind of what the um, political cartoon is attempting to make the argument of here. They were forced to pay $30 billion in reparations. Spoiler alert, they didn't have that money and it tanked Germany's economy, as we talked about in the first set of notes. They lost a lot of their territory that they had occupied before or during World War I. So they lost Alsace-Lorraine, the Polish corridor, the Saar coalfields. They were forced to demilitarize the Rhineland, which is an area that we'll talk about in, I think, 2 slides. And then they were forced to limit their army to no more than 100,000 men, and they were explicitly banned from having submarines or airplanes. So these will be different conditions from the Treaty of Versailles that create inciting incidents for the beginning of World War II. So in terms of thinking about appeasement, this is an analogy that I stole from someone because I think it's brilliant, right? But we're looking at an aisle in a grocery store, and we've all been to a grocery store where there is a parent pushing around a child who is literally screaming, right? This kid is throwing a fit because they couldn't get a toy, they couldn't get candy, they couldn't get sugary cereal, right? The first, second, third time, their parent said no, it sets them off. So, as a parent in this situation, right, when you are taking small children to the grocery store, you have, you know, 2 options. Do you double down on your hard no, you don't get something and risk being that parent who has the screaming child that can be heard all around the store? Or do you give in to the screaming child, hoping that giving them one thing that they want will calm them down from everything that they want? And it was just a small fit that people can go, yeah, I heard a kid cry. Okay, the end. And this is kind of a good way to think about some of the attitudes that the democratic nations of Europe, especially the United Kingdom, kind of looked at Germany with, right? They believed that Germany was the screaming kid in the grocery store throwing a fit. So this notion of appeasement becomes the question of how can we calm Germany down and give them something that they might want, uh, so we don't have to, repeat and have a sequel to the First World War. So we'll pause there for a second, give you a sanity break, kind of start thinking about the frame of appeasement, go see if we've mentioned anything that you can fill in on the first page of your term sheet, and then we'll come back for a second part here in a few moments.